Hello, class. Today's lecture is relatively short. It's just on the path to global status. So we're going to look at some of the reasons why organizations, what is that? Hello, class. Today the lecture is on the path to global status. So what we're going to do during this lecture is we're going to look a little bit at how organizations go from just being a domestic entity to becoming a global or a multinational company. And there's generally stages or phases that the company will go through, including growth. And then the book talks about different structures as the company grows. So as the company grows and expands overseas, they tend to take on different structures, whether more centralized or more decentralized. We're not going to get too much into those with this lecture. They're in your book. I have them presented in these slides too. But again, we're not going to get too heavily into those different structures. But I'd like to talk a little bit about the role of HR too in this. So this chapter, again, chapter 3 of your text, focuses a lot on just what are some of the general issues as I go from a domestic company to an international company. And as we're going along there, we're just flavoring a little bit with what is some of the HR function along the way. So when you're talking about the organizational structures themselves changing, the book outlines 3 reasons why they typically do. Number 1 is the strain imposed by growth and geographic spread. So as we get bigger, as we take on more employees, as we maybe go into different countries, the structure of the organization needs to change. The hierarchy, the reporting, the way communication is handled needs to change. So again, it may become more centralized in some instances. It may become more decentralized in some instances, but it really depends on kind of a number of factors as we expand and grow. The need for improved coordination and control across the business units. So again, as we get bigger, there's more people who are making decisions. There's more decisions that need to be made. And we might want to maintain some level of control over what's going on in these various business units. In order to accommodate that, the structure, the way we're organized, may need to change. And lastly, there's constraints imposed by the host government on regulations of ownership and equity. So I think in the last unit we discussed the pay structures in Germany a little bit, where we really need to keep it localized because the standardization of that just doesn't happen because of government regulations. Well, the same thing here. The structure of our organization may need to change because of government regulations on ownership and owners' equity and things like that. So stages of internationalization. So again, we're starting off as a company, and typically we don't become a multinational conglomerate overnight, right? Now, the book does mention that sometimes we could leapfrog some of these stages because maybe we can go out and buy a subsidiary or buy somebody, and all of a sudden we grow from here to here very quickly. But typically that doesn't happen. Typically it's going to come in stages. So these are the stages outlined by the book. The first is usually in exporting. I'm taking my product, I'm still manufacturing it in my home country, but now I'm starting to export it into other areas. So that's kind of the first foray or the first step into becoming an international company. Again, usually when I do that function is being handled by a third party. And maybe there's a marketing firm that's set up in the country that I'm doing business with. So I'm really selling to them, and then they're going out and selling. Sometimes that relationship breaks down too. Sometimes there's some difficulties with that relationship. So the next step is to open a sales subsidiary. So I am now going and I'm going to open something in the country where I'm doing the sales myself in this country. So you see, I went from just simply exporting into a country via a third party to now having the sales subsidiary in that country. So here's where that HR function now comes in, because as a human resource director, now I have to think about staffing, and I have to think about things like compensation, and I have to think about things like performance management across borders. After that sales subsidiary step, we're in that for a few years. Then what may come next is foreign production. So now, instead of just manufacturing here in my home country, now I'm manufacturing in a foreign country, in addition to doing the sales and all the other functions that are going on. Again, adding layers of complexity to the issues. And then lastly is becoming maybe this big multinational where I have a network of subsidiaries that need to be managed and looked over. And again, the HR function here typically revolves around compensation, which can be difficult when you're dealing across borders. And a lot of times it's that expatriate issue, right, where I have people from my home country who are now going to go over there and run these sales office, run these production offices. And when that's the case, then all those issues we talked about a few weeks ago come into play, where training, development, bringing them back into the host country when their assignments are done, all those issues now are on the table. All of a sudden, where in the past they probably weren't. So those are the stages. Again, it starts with exporting, goes into direct sales, us going in there and selling, to production, to this network of subsidiaries. So then your book gets into a bunch of different department structures. So based on that previous slide, what we said, what we assumed is kind of going on process-wise, there's different matrices or different structures that tend to work. So here's an international division structure. So we have an international division. Now we've grown. It's been a few years when we've grown from exporting to this international division, and I'm going to have headquarters and domestic divisions, and then it's going to be country specific. So then the two major multinational issues of structure is the extent to which key decisions are made at PC headquarters or subsidiary units. And it talks there about centralization versus decentralization. So where are the decisions being made? At home, at headquarters, and then being pushed down? Or are they being made out at these business units or subsidiary units? So centralized versus a more decentralized structure. And again, where those decisions are being made is really going to impact the structure of the organization. And the type of control exerted by the parent over the subsidiary unit. How big is a subsidiary unit? Remember we talked about things like education levels and skill levels of the employees maybe in the country I'm doing business with. Well, are they able to function as an independent unit, or does a lot of control still need to be coming from the headquarters, from the home country? So all those things contribute to the structure of the organization. So for this chapter, it'd be wise to go back, just review those different structures, the way they're set up, the way the hierarchy is set up, the way the reporting is set up, and keep in mind that as we grow, the HR function goes from just worrying about the issues of being a domestic country to slowly bringing on the issues of maybe expatriate or foreign compensation, foreign performance management as we go into maybe sales and a production department.